プリキュアどもめ、数が増えるなんて聞いてねえし。
This week, we open with supposedly the most important meal of the day. Personally, I'd argue that's more dinner. But yeah, Ageha had made breakfast for everyone, including her co-star for this episode.
That's racist!
Of course, their relationship was still awkward, with Ageha still notably calling him boy in front of the others, and yet later in the episode, she does call him Tsubasa when it's just them and L, so I guess the idea is it's meant to be more of a personal greeting, but come on, after a whole episode, you're still gonna play this game, Ageha? Anyway, the opening of course got another change up with the addition of Ageha, and yet the eye catch didn't change. Guess it wasn't ready in time or something. Still, it was nice to see the team finally complete here, but when I see a sequence like this, all I can think is, well... Later, when Sora and Mashiro went off to school, Ageha gave them some bento she had made on top of making them breakfast, and yeah, you could kind of guess where this episode was going. This was reinforced when the adult Cure started cleaning and renovating without anyone's permission. Though, one thing I will say about this episode is at the very least, it's a lot better than the aforementioned last episode that featured these two, if only because Ageha wasn't annoying Tsubasa nearly as much. Even though he did keep them, he actually did like some of Ageha's choices in deco, and did at least keep the cushion she had given him. Interactions like this can be seen as developing a bond between the two, rather than forcing them to get along after quarreling for almost a whole episode. Later, they would end up playing with Elle, mostly Tsubasa with her, and Ageha would give both of them a bath. I don't know, maybe he gets a fro? Get to work, fan ours. But yeah, again, these were cute scenes that not only helped to develop the two, but also established this B-team as the main caretakers of the princess. That night, Sora would note her interpretation of the word age based on her friend's behavior, even though ageha actually refers to a type of butterfly, but whatever, semantics. The point was that she was uplifting everyone's spirits, which is what age means when written like this. Problem was that while a person can uplift everyone else's spirits, their own uplifted spirit will become far more limited. Tsubasa would discover this when he tried to literally be the early bird. Had a little too much last night. Oh wait, she's 18, not 20. Forget I say anything. But yeah, obvious lesson of the day was obvious. Helping others is nice and everything, especially as the newest and oldest member of this team, but Ageha really shouldn't overexert herself and should try to rely on others. Tsubasa was quick to point this out. See, this kid gets it. Still, obvious or not, this lesson does at least speak to Ageha's established character as someone who believes that adults should do everything for the younger generation, not realizing that not only is that a bit of an outdated mindset, but also kind of immature due to the inherent stubbornness behind it. This was reinforced by the ironic fact that the youngest member of this team was pointing it out. Good stuff. Anyway, the adult immediately kind of took advantage of the kid and asked Tsubasa to help her with something the next day. It turned out to be contributing to a mural the preschoolers from the previous episode had helped paint. This was also, of course, meant to hint at the episode's climax, but still, did anyone else kind of forget Ageha could draw? I mean, I think the most we got was her little iPad presentation in her debut episode. I mean, at least with Tsubasa, it was established that his whole tribe, including his dad, were artists, so it makes sense. Speaking of which, he had also realized that Ageha kind of reminded him of his parents, and I guess those other two unimportant characters were like his sisters. This resulted in a nice scene to establish the familial bonds this team has made, including Elle, who joined in through some good old finger painting. But I guess that was a little too wholesome, so Batamonda decided to crash things. He had come up with a new plan to pick off his enemies in smaller numbers. Not a bad plan, especially when targeting the two least experienced members of this team, but wouldn't it have also been better to pick them off one by one? Well, anyway, he created an eco-friendly version of Garbodor, and what the hell? Why did this one non-action cut need these many freaking frames? It feels incredibly wasteful. Thankfully, the actual fight was also really nicely animated. Not sure if it was as nice as this, but whatever, I appreciate callbacks to Go Princess at least. Anyway, thanks to the return of those soda missiles from the second episode, god, we're making a lot of callbacks, Ageha also had to worry about protecting the mural, which Batamonda took notice of. Anyway, Ageha established herself as the tank of this team, even more so than in her debut episode. They also just kind of reiterated the message of this episode when Elle tried to help, making Ageha ask for Tsubasa's assistance, which I think she was already doing by inviting him out here in the first place, but whatever, the dramatic music was playing. More importantly, this did result in the God Baby providing the Deus Ex Machina of the episode. At first, the two tried to do their version of the updraft Shining, which thank God did not happen, because that finisher, the more I look at it, kind of sucks, and they got something objectively much better. As not only could this mixed palette provide buffs to teammates, it could also allow this B team to access their finisher. Actually, let's go with a bit more of a deeper cut. Then again, they didn't even go all the way, as halfway through, it became the Fat Chocobo summon from Final Fantasy. Y'all are just trying to get sued by Square Enix, aren't ya? Hilariously enough, Tsubasa even complained about this afterwards, but yeah, all that said, and apart from that slow beginning due to Ageha need to press all of the buttons as though this were Decade's complete form, this was probably my favorite finisher of this season so far. I actually love how it shifts from this epic attack of Ageha riding on the Phoenix Tsubasa, only to become comedic in the second half, and yet all of it was really well animated. Again, I'm not sure if it was as nice as this scene, but A+ for creativity to say the least. And with that, the episode of course ended with everyone splitting up the chores evenly, and I guess Ageha gained the first day off, of course. The cameo cures returned this week, with Miyuki thankfully sounding relatively on point, unlike some of the others. Granted, nowadays I do associate her VA more with that toxic Hikikomori from FGO. This was a nice character building episode for the show's B team, who somehow got a much better finisher. And while this was a slight retread of the previous outing between these two, they did change it up enough to make it feel like they were developing and made for a believable duel. There was also an almost painfully obvious lesson of the day, but that didn't really detract from an episode that was exactly what it needed to be. After that previous episode that we do keep bringing up, I have to admit, I wasn't crazy about these two getting another episode. Their relationship in that one just felt incredibly repetitive, with Tsubasa constantly asking Ageha to not treat him like a kid, which you'd think someone studying to become a preschool teacher would know how to respond to, or at least show some common courtesy and not call him a boy. That was also kinda present in this episode, though thankfully a lot more subdued. Ageha was a little pushy, but never really making Tsubasa truly uncomfortable. In fact, her forcefulness did drive the initially shy bird to become more assertive, and even become the one to deliver the lesson of the episode. Yeah, it was an obvious message, but that in of itself isn't a problem. And it did help to establish the dynamic between these two, much like how Sora and Mashiro could switch between being the more reserved and aggressive of the two. Tsubasa and Ageha were going back and forth on who was the more mature of the two. Ageha had the ability to take the lead as the eldest and pinkest member of this team, and yet also did kind of need Tsubasa to reel her in. It made for a nice dynamic that did distinguish them from our initial duel. This was then highlighted thanks to a really well animated first fight with this duel, along with a superior finisher. Seriously, why did these two get the non-lame finisher? Nah, whatever. The mixed palette is a fun new arsenal that hopefully can also buff other members of this team, and maybe even provides a few more finishers. After all, we didn't see Tsubasa use his jewel on it, so who knows? And overall, this was a nice episode. Again, a lot better than their last episode, as we actually got to see these two work off each other, and at least have some chemistry. While I personally will continue to see them as the B team, as I'm just more interested in our initial duel, I also do have to give credit where it's due, and say that these two make for a fun, at least more creative pair. This week, we managed to get a proper start to reviewing the third part of the OG series, which, yeah, I'm just as surprised as you. I mean, for one thing, a lot of you voted for it, so we kind of have to do it. Plus, I will admit, there are a few more things I do want to say about the latter half of the OG series than the former, which aren't all good, let's say that much. So look forward to it. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and could y'all do your little dance somewhere else, please?